everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sport and Directions, proudly sponsored by Tsunami Teamwear, with me, Gavin Taylor.
And me, Tavis Roberts.
For those of you that are new to the show, the Sports Direction podcast is aimed at providing some ideas and guidance for those of you who want to pursue a career in the world of sport. Over the course of this first series, we'll be interviewing a range of professionals of different sporting areas to share some of their amazing stories. We'll be having them share with us some of their achievements, their struggles, and any advice they may have for many of you wanting to also pursue a career in sport. Today, we're really happy to welcome Jack Cassidy. And Jack Cassidy is an international football coach, now working with Al Jazira Football Club in the Abu Dhabi. Jack has a wonderful story with an extensive history being involved in football. Jack has coached at several football clubs, most notably Luton Town FC, who are currently in the Championship. He moved over to Sweden to take over a lead coaching role before getting the opportunity to be a lead academy coach in the UAE. So welcome, Jack.
Thank you all for the invite, and looking forward to speaking with you.
Really happy for you to be here, Jack. Thanks so much for taking the time to meet with us. So let's begin with our first question, Jack. Give us a strong memory that led you to be in the direction of pursuing a career in sport.
I was actually a confused teenager. I was really unsure of which direction I wanted to go in. When you are at that age and you're sort of 16 years old, and I stayed on at sixth form purely because I had no clue what else to do. We had a sixth form attached to our school, so the easiest thing to do was to stay on. I did 3 subjects. One was sport, which is something I was passionate about. And then I think I did psychology and business. And it was literally because I just picked 2 random subjects. And again, it was a question that was asked by my parents a lot, particularly my mum. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? And the truth is, I didn't have a clue. And then my friend's dad encouraged us to do an FA level 1, which was taking place, which is a football coaching course. The first level was actually taking place at our school one weekend. And I was in sixth form, and he said, if you both do this, you can help. We were both playing for a local Sunday league team. And he said, if you do this, you can help with the same team, but the under 13s, if you get this level 1. And I thought, that's interesting. I could tell that I was interested in organising, and I'd help organise some school games, the teams. And I sort of was early on, I could sense that I was interested in those sorts of things. So I did this FA level 1. And it actually led to me meeting somebody that was doing that level 1, which ended up being my first boss. And then I got my first job in a sport pupil referral unit, and sort of my journey kicked on from there. But to be honest, it was a little bit by chance. I could tell some of the skills may have been suited to coaching and to sport, but I'm so thankful for 2 things: that level 1 taking place at my school, because if it was taking place somewhere else, would I have attended? And actually to my friend's dad, who encouraged us to actually attend that course.
That's a great answer. And I'm sure like a lot of listeners are going to be able to relate to this, like getting to your sixth form and not having a clear direction or clear picture of what you want to do. I picked up that you really got into it about, you were really interested in organising the school games or the under 13s in your local club. And it sounds like you really wanted to give back to the community, or like you had an interest in having service. Is that something that has still sort of stayed with you from the start of your career?
Yeah, I think I was fortunate, really. My childhood, to be honest, was quite comfortable. I was brought up in a village outside Bedford. I don't think I hadn't seen or experienced much of the world by 17, 18, if I'm being honest. And that first job that I had at the pupil referral unit sent me to Luton, which is a tough area in England. And it's a very multicultural area. And it's an area in which there's a lot of schools in troubled areas. And this pupil referral, when I worked in this pupil referral unit, I saw so many things. You were working with a lot of the kids that had been expelled or excluded from school. And that was the biggest learning curve for me. I was 18 years old. Some of these kids were 16, 15. They're quite close to my age. And I was working with kids that I've never seen or dealt with before. I didn't go to school with that demographic of kids. And I think doing that for 4 years really opened up my eyes to things out, how fortunate I was where I lived, and with my background, and actually the power of helping others and the way that sport could influence and motivate students. And that was I think that those 4 years in Luton doing that job actually totally changed my outlook on life and sort of grew me up a little bit, really, in a short amount of time. And sort of I really saw what resilience was in some of those students in that pupil referral unit.
That's some really strong things to share. Like, it must have been really inspiring to be able to have this sort of impact on the young people's lives, especially when they're going through difficult times of themselves, and being able to guide them into the direction of sports. What else sort of was inspiring for you? Like, one of the people that you could impact, and where did they start from and where did they finish, sort of thing? Like, what was that sort of inspiration?
I think you never know someone's backstory. I think teaching is so difficult, and when you've got a classroom full of 30 kids, often at different levels, and every one of those students has got a different story behind their front door, and sometimes they're so challenging, these students, that's why they'd end up in our environment. But when we were able to channel some of their qualities, like some of these kids were really good leaders, and they'd do their sports leaders course with us, you see, while they were playing the sport, and they'd be doing delivery. And it was amazing when you place these kids in different environments with the right level of support, in doing a qualification which is far more suited to them, because maybe they're really uncomfortable and sitting in a classroom doing algebra and maths, which I was as well. And we had students that, if I can remember one student, he moved over from Italy. He spoke no English at 15 years old. Didn't do so well in the mainstream school. He came to us, really enjoyed his football. He loved his football. He was a big Juventus fan. He moved over from a big football city. And eventually, someone I still speak to now, he's a fully trained sports therapist working in sport hospitals. And when I look at something like that, I think, wow, even if I played that 1% in just inspiring him to do something in sport, it's worth it for those sorts of stories. And look, you can't help everybody. There were some sad stories of students that are now sadly no longer with us because of gang-related issues, and some that may be in prison, and that was difficult to deal with. I learned that it's actually not possible to help everybody who walks through the doors, but if you can continue to try and have a positive impact on as many people as you can, then it can be inspiring and uplifting for yourself as the leader and the tutor.
Jack, I mean, I'm sure I speak for all of the listeners when I say that's an incredible story, and I love the fact that you've given a brilliant example of a young man that's come over from Italy, and I'm sure, obviously, as a teacher with me and Tavis as well, the job satisfaction that we get from our role, and obviously the same in coaching, is absolutely huge. But I really want to kind of dig into that last part that you talked about, and you said there that there's some tough stories that you talked about, and I wouldn't ask you to share any of those because obviously they're quite tough. But you've obviously got an incredible story. You've been hugely successful. Kind of what I want to know is, it's really great to celebrate the positive stories, and I'm sure when you tell that story about the young man who came from Italy, that brings you, that bubbling feeling inside, and real happiness of, yeah, I made an impact on this young man. How did you overcome the bad side? So when there was instances where you heard of pupils that you'd supported that had gone down the wrong road or had suffered some sort of negative impact, how do you overcome that? How do you, as an individual, dust yourself down and go again?
Difficult at the start, because I think you're quite naive at the start. You think you can go and help everybody. You're that person to change that person. I think football managers also, the next manager always thinks they can be the one to change that troubled player, and sometimes it's just not possible to help everybody. And I remember years later, after working on that pupil referral unit, we had an excellent student who was straight A student, and he could have been anything, and he died in within some sort of getaway with the police in a robbery. He couldn't step away from that gang-related culture, and I think there was a chase, and he crashed this motorbike he was on, and so on. And when I heard that, it was at the start, it was very difficult to get my head around that you couldn't help everybody, and because you put so much energy into everybody, it was learning to accept that. And I'm sure, and I haven't, just to make not such a good comparison, but I'm sure doctors and nurses must face that all the time, the amount of care that they give to everybody. Yet the unfortunate thing is the evolution of life is that some people are going to pass away. They're not going to be able to save everybody. And I think once you can get your head around that and not get despondent, as long as the way I saw it was, as long as I put my head on the pillow at night and I felt that I did everything, and I do that even with how I prepare for football matches now. As long as I go to bed the night before a game and I feel that I prepared the team the best I can, then I can't do any more. And I sort of, that's the motto that I actually learned from those pupil referral unit days. I felt that gave me such a good grounding for even the stuff that I'm doing now.
I mean, that's incredible. Like you said, it's about controlling the controllables, isn't it? And like you said, I think that's a mantra for all of us is you do the best that you can and you can control that. And as long as you do the best that you can, then you can say, as you said, using your analogy, sleep easy at night. So, I mean, your story is an incredible one. I kind of want to know a little bit more about what you're thinking about, all of the things that you've done. I mean, we talked about in the intro about how you managed to go over to Sweden and be a lead coach on your own. Now you've ended up taking lead in an academy in the UAE. What would you say is your greatest ever achievement? It could be a football promotion. It could be a student that you've referred to that you helped. It could be a personal achievement of coming over adversity. But I'm just curious to know, you've got such an incredible story. What's the number one that you say, yeah, do you know what, out of all of it, this is the one I'm the most proud of?
I think a personal achievement for myself is, I remember the day I stepped onto that level 1 coaching course, I felt that this is an environment that I felt really comfortable in. And I said to the lead tutor at the time, I said, I'd love to coach full time one day. And when I look back to his response, it was quite inspiring, because he goes, oh, it's possible. You could do that. And I think it worked out about 11 years later that I passed my A license. And for me, that was a personal proud achievement. I hadn't come from a football family and didn't really have any contacts in football. And I felt that for me to work and work my way up the sort of the coaching pathway, that was a really proud sort of personal achievement from me, and one that I'm really happy and proud to have that award.
You must notice there's a big difference between your level 1 and an A license. As you said, it takes 11 years. So what are the sort of different skills that you need between level 1 to an A license? How did you progress personally or skill-wise?
I just think it was loads and loads of practice. We were actually in a position where when you first start that level 1, you don't really have you have a knowledge from playing your local football as you do as a young grassroots player, but you haven't really got an idea of how to structure a session, how to run a warm-up, those sorts of things. But on the flip side, the more you coach, the more you're getting better, the more you're developing. I just think the level of detail in the qualifications naturally, as you go up the levels, increases. But then we all know, for me, it still goes back to how you deal with people, because we all know A licensed coaches or high level qualified coaches or teachers that are just actually struggle to build a rapport with the students or players, depending on what environment. And actually then, does that make them a good coach? Because they might have that qualification, but if they can't get inspire that group in front of them, then arguably they're falling short.
Two really strong points, as in the more practice that you do, or the more input, the more time that you give something, the better that you can get and the more progress you have. And then you can't just focus on the content, but you also have to focus on the relationship. That's another strong thing to say, especially in my background as a teacher. It's 100% correct. I guess the next question I'd ask is, what sort of advice would you give to people? Seeing that you've progressed the way that you have, what sort of advice would you give to the next generation of coaches or up and coming people? Where should they put their focus? Where should they put their time?
Some of the common things that I see in coaches now is how quickly they want to get into a professional club, and the badge on the front of the chest becomes really, really important, and they chase the badge rather than actually the experiences. So my biggest advice I say to people, you need to go and take your local grassroots team. You don't have to be traveling 2 hours to go to a professional club, to stand there in observe for weeks on end. I think there's value to that, to observation, but ultimately you need to get in there and have a go. Just because it's a local grass, not because their parents can't bring them. How do you cope with behaviour issues within the group? How do you cope with a player that's on the low end of the spectrum, and how do you cope with a player that's on the high end of the spectrum? How are you challenging both, the differentiation within the group? So I think you need to just get out there and practice and coach, and it doesn't matter what environment, different environment, and you have to put the hours in. It's endless and endless and endless hours. I've done so many voluntary coaching hours. I wouldn't even be able to tally it up. And in so many different age groups and environments, I just think sometimes people maybe do a few months of that and think they're ready to move on to the next level. And I don't think it's as easy as that.
Jack, I mean, again, we're coming to the end, and I know the listeners have been inspired by you, because I know I have, and I know Tavis has. Let me just ask you a bit of a weird question, but one that hopefully will make a bit of sense. Again, talking us through your story and your journey, you've obviously gone through a lot of adversity, and then obviously had to really build that resilience yourself. If you could go back in time and you were looking at yourself when you were in that first day of that coaching course, what would you say to yourself now? What would be the words of advice that Jack Cassidy would give Jack Cassidy?
It's an interesting one, resilience, because I've worked with some incredible students that have had these unbelievable backgrounds, and their reaction to adversity has made them so resilient. And whereas I actually think I've had to build that up a little bit myself, I think I got an incredible work ethic off my parents. I saw them go to work hard, and I think I've taken that with me. But like I said, I had a really comfortable upbringing. I wouldn't say there was too many moments where I had to be too resilient, but I found I did that when I experienced my own career. I actually failed my UEFA B license 2 times before passing it. And I remember after the first time, it knocked me back. I thought, I can't do this. And I think that's where I really spur people on of these different backgrounds. Just because you may have a background that's from a different area, where you've had to really work hard to get out of this particular area you live in, all these things, actually you can really turn that to your advantage, because you've got this natural resilience, and you've got this natural coming from that hardship sometimes can actually really be a strength. Whereas for me, I felt I built that resilience later on, particularly being in an environment like football where it's so ruthless and everybody's got an opinion on it. And so I felt that I was naive to that when I did my level 1. So I've sort of answered your question in a roundabout way, but definitely when I got to my B license and I wasn't successful first time, that's when I started to really develop resilience. And I sort of just, so to speak, got back on the horse and went again, and eventually passed the qualification later on. And I've now taken that attitude, which for me has allowed me to be resilient in moving abroad for these job opportunities. And so that's something I felt I actually developed later on. But if any of your listeners, whatever your background is, for me, you can make a positive of it. There is opportunities there, and you can actually, whatever your story is, you can turn a lot of the skills that your story has developed within you into a real positive and kickstart your journey.
Listen, I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say that you should be super proud of your achievements up to this point, and I'm sure you are. And you spent a lot of time talking about your parents, and I'm sure they're super proud of you as well. So I was just curious to know what's next. What's next for Jack Cassidy? He's worked his way up to UEFA A. He's had an opportunity to lead a team in Sweden. He's now an academy coach in the Middle East. Where do you see your future in the next 3 or 4 years, or an end goal, or just something just to share with us?
Yeah, but for me, I want to stay in professional football. I feel blessed that I've been able to coach and teach in so many different environments, and I think it's actually that differentiation of those environments that's helping me now, particularly culturally here. And you can fall back on all these different experiences. And I think I'd love to work at first team level. I've had a snapshot taste of it at non-league level in England, which is semi-professional. But I'd like to now that I'm working in professional football here, whether it be here or elsewhere, I'd like to work in first team football. there's no, I don't necessarily always put time frames or anything. I just want to keep developing and bettering myself every year. And I'm a believer, as long as I continue to work hard and do the right things, that those opportunities, will come, as long as I'm meeting the right people and putting myself out there. So that's an aim of mine. I'd like to become an established first team coach and continue to just try and test myself. I think that the different levels that you can work at and the different environments, everything's a new challenge, and it continues to sort of test and challenge you each time.
Listen, I'm sure the listeners agree. I've got no doubt that you will get there with the skill sets that you've achieved and the things that you've achieved throughout your career, Jack. So coming to the end of the interview, and again, we like to finish with a bit of a fun question. I'm going to ask you a question myself, and then obviously Tavis will jump in and ask his. But my question is just a short, sharp one. If you could give us a short, sharp answer, that'd be wonderful. Just give us one sentence or saying that you say you feel you live your life by.
I'd say keep doing more. That's probably like a mantra that I've kept. Keep doing more.
Hey, thanks, Jack. That's encouraging. There's always something more that I can do as well. What is one of your strange habits or skills that you have had or developed that has helped you on this journey?
I think organisation. I've got. I think it's sort of a negative and a positive at times. I am very organised. I'm a bit of a stickler for time. If we're getting ready to go out and I'm going out for a meal with my missus and I say we're leaving at 8 and it's 2 minutes past 8 and she's still not ready, which is quite often the case, I'm pacing up and down the hallway. So she gets a little bit frustrated with it and says I'll rule like a sergeant major at times. But I think on the flip side, it's allowed me to, it's been a strength in my career because, if I need to get stuff done, I don't necessarily procrastinate. I can get stuff done. I like being organised. I like sort of links to that previous question of keep doing more. But sometimes I do wish I could just chill out a little bit more and relax.
Don't we all? Jack, thanks very much for answering the question. I really enjoyed hearing your feedback and hearing your story. So yeah, really thank you for coming on and sharing with us all today.
No, privilege. Thank you for inviting me on, and I really think it's a fantastic idea, the podcast, and hopefully myself and all the other guests can inspire the next generation of people. So thank you for the invitation.
Again, I'd like to echo that from Tavis. Huge thank you, Jack, for coming on. I'm sure the listeners have really enjoyed it. I know we have. Thanks again. Thank you for your time. And for everyone else out there, we'll see you all next time.